in defense of the nation, 1794 to 1868. 3 systems of fortifications were designed to protect the coastline of the United States of America during its first century. First system fortifications consisted of earthworks surrounding wood structures. Second system fortifications were made of earthworks and stone and brick structures. Third system fortifications, built of thick masonry walls, provided the ultimate design for fort structures from 1812 to 1868. Fort Clinch is a third system fortification. Construction on Fort Clinch began in 1847. The fort, shaped like an irregular pentagon, has 5 tower bastions. It was built of masonry and stone with 2 wall systems of brick and earth. The fort was designed to garrison 500 soldiers and 78 pieces of artillery. A civilian workforce, directed by officers of the United States Army Corps of Engineers, was employed to construct the fort. Progress was slow, and by 1860 only 2/3 of the walls were completed, and not a single cannon had been mounted. The guard rooms, prison, lumber sheds, and carpentry shops were completed. The storehouse and kitchens remained unfinished. The Civil War, 1861 to 1865. At the beginning of the Civil War, as Florida seceded from the Union, Confederate forces quietly took control of Fort Clinch. Rather than continuing construction on the fort, the Confederate Army established batteries in the town of Fernandina and at strategic locations on Amelia and Cumberland Islands. Federal forces, advancing along several South Carolina and Georgia coastal islands, caused General Robert E. Lee to authorize the withdrawal of Confederate forces from the area in early 1862. On March 3, 1862, as the Confederate evacuation was nearing completion, Federal warships and troops arrived to re-establish control of Fort Clinch. Company E of the 1st New York Volunteer Engineers worked tirelessly to complete the fort. Despite continuing efforts, Fort Clinch was never completed. In 1869, it was placed into caretaker status. Spanish-American War, 1869 to 1898. From 1869 till 1898, the Army maintained Fort Clinch under caretaker status. On February 15, 1898, the sinking of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor thrust the United States into war with Spain and brought the fort back to life. Battery A of the 6th United States Artillery arrived at Fort Clinch and readied it for war. The soldiers immediately set about building a gun mount for an 8-inch breech loading rifle on the fort's northeast parapet. The weapon was mounted 6 months later. 4 15-inch Rodman Columbiads were also placed into service, and a minefield was laid in the front of Fort Clinch. With the ending of hostilities in late 1898, all troops were removed and Fort Clinch was returned to caretaker status. A diamond in the rough, 1926 to 1942. The federal government sold the fort and surrounding property to private interest in 1926 because it was no longer considered of military value. In 1935, the state of Florida bought the fort and surrounding property in order to preserve it and provide outdoor recreational opportunities. Between 1937 and 1942, the Civilian Conservation Corps Company 1420 repaired the fort and constructed the visitor center, roads, camping area, bathhouse, and picnic area. The work of the CCC here and across the state became the foundation of the Florida State Park System. Fort Clinch is one of Florida's first 8 state parks. The Second World War, 1942 to 1945. The U.S. Armed Forces pressed Fort Clinch into service one last time during World War II. The Coast Guard, in joint operation with the Army and Navy, established and maintained a surveillance and communication system within the fort and on various islands in the area. In September of 1942, the use of horses for beach patrol was approved. The mounted patrol kept watch for landings of spies and saboteurs along the beach until 1945, when the fort site was returned to the state of Florida. A National Treasure, 1945 to present. Today, Fort Clinch stands as one of the finest examples of a third system fortification in existence and is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Historic interpreters provide authentic insight into the lives of the Army, Navy, and Coast Guard personnel who served at the Fort Clinch between 1847 and 1945. Fort Clinch is a symbol of how the United States of America provides protection from hostile forces to its citizens.